Happy April Fool's Day, you damn fools. Viewer Great Goblin suggested I upload this video on this very day, which for some weird reason hadn't occurred to me. It would have been pretty foolish to upload this video right around April 1st, but not actually on that day. Anyway, as you may have noticed, I'm a big fan of joke-themed villains. Some people are of the opinion that there's only room for one joke-themed villain in comics, and you all know who that one is. But in my opinion, that's plain crazy. We've got tons of ice villains, electric villains, time villains, and so on, so naturally we should have tons of joke villains too. In fact, I'm of the opinion that every single rogues gallery should have a joke-themed villain in their ranks. As usual, this list is merely my opinion. Feel free to rank your favorite harlequins in the comments. And without further ado, send in the clowns. Number 5. The Prankster. Oswald Loomis, aka the Prankster, is one of 2 resident jokers in the Superman Rogues Gallery, so kudos to Superman, he's gotten it. Loomis is, as you can see, a very funny looking, portly fellow, kinda resembling Alfred E. Newman, the Mad Magazine kid. I guess he might be Alfred's dad. Loomis is a hilariously charming rogue whom I just absolutely love. During the 1940s, he was one of Superman's biggest foes, appearing countless times during that decade to prank the Man of Steel. In fact, he even rivaled Lex Luthor for the title of Superman's arch-nemesis. Pretty crazy to think now. Back in the earliest of days, the Prankster was a very deadly fellow, a cold-blooded comedian who pulled off spectacular cons, tricking the entire city of Metropolis on more than one occasion. However, he quickly grew more harmless, like so many other comic book villains, and soon became a silly jester obsessed with pulling the greatest prank on Superman. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In the 1950s, Loomis completely disappeared from the scene and didn't show up again until over a decade later. His subsequent appearances were very sporadic. Following the Crisis reboots of Superman in the mid-1980s, Prankster was reimagined as a deranged host of a declining children's TV program. Years later, he was reimagined once again, as a so-called distraction for hire. Whenever criminals needed a big distraction to draw away attention from their heist, they called upon the Prankster. No matter how the character is portrayed, the Prankster is usually a ton of fun, a very quirky oddball villain, and you gotta love that silly appearance of his. Number 4. The Jester. Good old Jonathan Powers here, a foe of Daredevil, is the only Marvel villain on the list. Again, DC dominates. But of course there is that old saying, Marvel has the heroes while DC has the villains. Some might count Loki as a joke villain, and I guess he kinda is, but I don't quite count him, so he doesn't qualify for my list. Of course, if you want to put him on your list, then that's fine. Anyway, for those who don't know, Powers here was a failed stage actor. He played a title role in a production of Cyrano de Bergerac, a role he felt he was born to play. However, the audience and the critics booed him. Following this massive disaster of a performance, Powers was unable to land himself any decent roles, and had to settle for being part of comedy acts, as the guy who got hit in the face with a pie. The poor fellow endured this humiliation for a prolonged period of time, until he finally had enough. Powers decided to strike back at the world who laughed at him. If it was laughter they wanted, then laughter they would get. Powers thus became the Jester, a manic harlequin of hate who pulled off crimes, employing various deadly joke gimmicks and toys. The table had now turned and the laugh was on his audience. The Jester never really became a major Daredevil foe. He was somewhat big during the Silver and Bronze Age of comics, but in more modern times the character has fallen into relative obscurity. These days the Jester has a reputation of being a stupid loser villain, one who's best forgotten. I obviously don't agree with that. I for one really like old Jonathan Powers. His backstory is very sympathetic, and often he's not portrayed as an evil villain, just a bitter man with a beef against society. Even Daredevil himself has acknowledged that Powers is a tragic figure, and one he can even relate to. I also love the Jester's costume, a colorful classic harlequin outfit. It looks great. Number 3. Mr. Mxyzptlk. So here's the other Joker of the Superman Rogues Gallery. Out of all the characters on this list, Mixie here is probably the most unique. All of these guys has, at one point or other, been called Joker ripoffs, but not Mixie. I've never heard anyone ever say that this guy is a ripoff of the Clown Prince of Crime, so that's certainly an accomplishment. The only joke villain in comics not to be compared with Batman's arch-nemesis. Fans who normally hate these other clowns seem completely fine with Mixie. That is probably because he is so different from all these other guys. Mr. Mixik is not some regular dude in a clown costume with joke toys. He's an imp from the 5th dimension, a supernatural being from another world. This quirky little fellow has the power to basically do anything. Whatever he can imagine, all he needs to do is will it to happen, and it happens. And what does Mixie use these incredible powers for? Galactic domination? No, he uses them to pull pranks on Superman. That's it. Because he thinks it's fun. You see, Mixie isn't some brooding, power-hungry Darksider Thanos type. He's a chill dude with a wacky sense of humor. It's even more fun when you realize Mixie could just will Darkseid and Thanos into paper clips if he wanted to. So I guess he's the most powerful villain in the universe. All universes included. DC, Marvel, and beyond. I don't know, maybe he's not, but I like to think that he is. And I love the fact that he just uses these powers to goof off. That's probably what I would do too. Who cares about silly world domination? That's a bunch of responsibility. Mr. Mixik is certainly one of the greatest fictional villains in existence, and one of my personal favorite Superman rogues. You gotta love that look of his too, with that face of his and that cigar. He kinda resembles some TV variety show comedian. Number 2, the Trickster. Yes, by now it's no secret that I love the Trickster, the Flash's resident joke villain. I've talked about this guy a lot, far more than the previous 3 on this list. And as I've repeated ad nauseum, the one and only Trickster for me is the original James Jesse. I'm sure you're getting sick of hearing it even. I suppose I should make this brief, as honestly I don't have a whole lot more to say about the Trickster. The greatest con man in the DC universe, with a flair for the theatrical. Jesse is both a born trickster and a showman. He grew up in a circus, eventually created earwalking shoes, donned a Jester outfit, and turned to outlandish crime. I love his earwalking shoes. That's a very cool gimmick and also pretty unique. It would be a lot of fun to see them in a Flash movie. If a Flash movie ever gets made, that is. I also love Jesse's style and personality. He's a wacky goofball, yet sly and cool at the same time. He's a combination of a kooky comedian and a slick grifter. There's something very old school about him. Silly Silver Age comics meets gritty film noir. I'm also a big fan of his blonde hair. I've got blonde hair just like that myself, and it's very rare to see a blonde male supervillain in comics. Unless of course it's a Nazi. Because yes, most blonde men are Nazis. And now for the greatest joke villain of them all. Number 1, the Clown. That's right, the other joke villain in the Flash Rogues gallery. You guys remember him, right? It's the first video I made as Mr. Rogues. Anyway, the Clown, real name Lyle Corley, was a circus performer just like James Jesse. No, I'm just kidding. The number 1 is of course the Joker. Who else? This is probably the most obvious number 1 on any of these theme lists. I actually considered excluding the Joker because it's so obvious. But then again, I've never excluded anyone on any of these other theme lists, so why start now? No, let's give proper credit where it's due. The Joker is of course the king of fools. The clown prince of crime, the ace of knaves, the harlequin of hate, the jester of genocide, and Puddin, as Batman likes to call him. So why is the Joker number 1? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. First off, the Joker is the one that started it all. He's the very first clown villain in superhero comics, and maybe in all of fiction. He's also the only one who takes his joke gimmick all the way, truly going for a killing. Unlike these other fellas, the Joker has a very morbid sense of humor. When he makes a joke, people literally die from laughter. That's another thing, his gadgets. Trickster may have ear-walking shoes, and Mr. Mixik may have omnipotent powers. But none of that can beat the Joker's terrifying signature weapon, his deadly laughing gas, or Joker Toxin, or Smilex, or whatever you want to call it. It truly is one of the greatest villain gimmicks in fiction, and it's been present since the very beginning. The Joker isn't just some quirky prankster, he's a maniacal mass-murdering clown who strikes when you least expect. That's part of the joke after all, his unpredictability. In more modern times, he's also combined his joke theme with a nihilistic philosophy that the whole world is one big joke. This gives the character a deeper meaning beyond being just a fun clown villain. And let's not forget his gorgeous appearance. I just talked about his visual design, so I won't go into details, but suffice it to say, he's the greatest looking evil clown of all time. When it comes to joke-themed villains, the Joker makes the rest look like harmless jokes. But of course that doesn't mean they aren't great too. So there you have it, my top 5 joke-themed fiends. You might wonder why I excluded a couple of major joke villains on this list, like Harley Quinn. I still consider her to be just an extension of the Joker, and obviously I didn't want to put Joker on 2 spots. I know a ton of people disagree with that sentiment, and that's fine, you can put Harley on your list. Then there's the arch nemesis of Spawn, Clown, aka Violator. Why wasn't he on the list? Well, I simply haven't read any Spawn comics, save for the very first issue about 10 years ago. I've wanted wanted to read Spawn for ages though, and maybe someday I will, and then make a Violator video. Again, if you want to put him on your list, then do so. Or just call me a hack fraud in the comments. In the next episode of this series, I go completely bananas and rank the 5 greatest ape villains. I have a feeling Marvel will be nowhere to be seen on that list. Anyway, as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.